Welcome to Euronews Tonight. I'm Mariam Zaidi. Here are headlines. World Health Organization says Omicron variant poses a very high risk of infection as G7 ministers agree on restrictions in order to buy time and let the scientists do their work. Trying to contain the spread of Omicron, countries around the world move fast to close borders and put health measures back in place. France says if the UK stops its double talk over the migrant crisis, London can come back to the table to find a solution.
And Jack Dorsey, the co-founder and CEO of Twitter, has resigned from the company. We'll have the story.
The World Health Organization says it's going to take time to get a full picture of the threat posed by Omicron, the new COVID-19 variant first identified in South Africa. The World Health Organization is warning the virus mutation is likely to spread internationally and poses a very high risk of infection. The Director General of the International Health Body says its emergence showed how perilous and precarious the situation still is. Countries around the world are moving fast to assess the health risk and put measures in place. Speaking after a meeting of G7 health ministers, Sajid Javid said they all agreed for the need to strengthen defences.
We were unanimous in our praise for the leadership shown by South Africa, who was so open and transparent about this new variant. And we were resolute in our commitment to working closely with each other, the World Health Organization, and, of course, the wider international community to tackle this common threat. Our experience of fighting this virus has shown us that it's best to act decisively and swiftly when we see a potential threat, which is why we're building our defences and putting these measures in place without delay.
Let's now cross live to Brussels to our correspondent Shona Murray. Shona, thanks for being on the programme. Omicron cases being identified all over Europe. Some countries we're seeing they are now closing their borders to South African countries, but still so many unknown variables when it comes to this new variant.
Yeah, that's the thing. We're looking to hear over the next few days and weeks as to how infectious this new variant is, whether it triggers more severe symptoms, and whether it evades in any way the vaccines or how strong the vaccines are in deterring it. So obviously those things are really important, and we're hoping to hear more about that in the next while. But for now, we've seen in Europe measures being taken, as we know, several countries from southern Africa not being able to come into Europe. But even other countries within the EU, Portugal, for example, is now insisting that everybody has a negative PCR test going into the country and using facilities like restaurants, clubs and bars while they're regardless of whether they've been vaccinated or not. And obviously that's a bit of a concern for the European Commission, because the whole point of the EU's COVID cert was that everybody works in unison and that people who are vaccinated shouldn't have any additional restrictions. So the Commission is looking at that in relation to its proportionality and whether it fits the spirit and the rules of the COVID cert, because obviously we know that the Commission during the week extended the length of time of the COVID cert to allow for booster shots.
All right, thank you so much, Shona. That was our correspondent Shona there, giving us the latest there from Brussels. Joining me now is Professor Helen Rees, an international vaccine expert in Johannesburg, South Africa. Professor Helen Rees, thanks so much for being on Euronews tonight. Now, South Africa has felt unfairly treated over this new variant. The G7 ministers today praised their fast response. So how has South Africa identified and flagged this variant so fast? Can you take us through it?
Yes, well, it was first picked up by laboratories that were doing routine testing to identify whether people had COVID infection or not. It's called a PCR test. And what they noticed was that PCR result was looking different to those that they'd been standardly reading. And these people very quite correctly thought this could be a new variant. And after that, there was genomic sequencing, and that confirmed that there was a new variant. But I think importantly, the scientists responded extremely rapidly to let the world know that this was what was identified. But that hasn't gone down well in some quarters. And I think that we do have to continuously reinforce the importance of sharing science and data as quickly as possible in the context of this pandemic.
Exactly. But so do you think the panic then over this Omicron variant has been warranted?
I think when any new variant arises, that we have to be very, very cautious worldwide. We are going to see new variants, and from this region, the African region, we've been saying this to the world for a long time. If you don't vaccinate this region and we don't get vaccines not only into countries but available to populations, we'll continue to see new variants. Now, we're all hoping that this variant that we're still trying to understand doesn't cause more severe illness. It does seem to be transmissible. And it does seem that some people are being reinfected who previously had COVID with another variant. But we're hoping that we're not going to see more severe illness. But if we don't get vaccination coverage up equitably across the world, the risk is that we will eventually get a variant that's completely resistant to vaccines and that could possibly cause more severe illness.
So a huge risk there. But in your opinion, I mean, you're someone that's worked very actively on the global response to COVID-19. The science isn't quite there, as you were saying as well, on the Omicron variant. But how much of a risk does it pose if compared to other variants from what we know so far?
Well, I think there are a few risks. One is that it does appear to be very transmissible. Whether it's more transmissible than Delta, we're yet to see, but it does appear to be very transmissible, which means that it spreads very easily between people. The second thing, as I said, is that it does appear that there are cases of infection in people who previously had COVID infection. And this suggests that the antibodies that you get from natural infection aren't protecting you. And that's our concern about vaccines. Will the vaccines be effective against this new variant? We're all hopeful that it will be, particularly against severe disease and hospitalization, because with all the other variants, we have seen that vaccines have retained their effectiveness. But that's the critical question, because vaccines are our greatest weapon at the moment to stop this pandemic.
So obviously the question over the vaccines is still unknown. Now, the G7 approach today is to let science investigate. It's a measured approach, but what would your advice be to people? How precautious should they be when it comes to this new variant?
I think, everyone should be very cautious. Clearly, different countries have become more or less liberal with their sort of routine public health measures. But now, especially with the transmissibility and the unknowns that we have about the variant, wearing masks is absolutely essential. Now, it's difficult in the European region because you're going into winter, but at least trying to avoid crowded indoor spaces and staying in ventilated spaces. These kinds of things are extremely important. But mask wearing, distancing, all the things we know about, those are our big tools, plus being vaccinated. We still believe that be extremely important in the context of this new variant.
Thank you so much, Professor Helen Rees. Thanks so much for joining us on the programme. France's Interior Minister says that if Britain stops the double talk and is serious about dealing with the migrant crisis, then it can come back to the table and France will be willing to talk. The comments by Gerald Darman come after the European officials met in Calais on Sunday, but without the UK. They agreed the EU's border agency would deploy a plane to monitor the English Channel and pledge to work closely to tackle migrant smuggling networks. The UK was, of course, uninvited after Prime Minister Boris Johnson publicly released a letter he had sent to President Emmanuel Macron. This is what the Interior Minister had to say.
It's in the common interest of Europe and Great Britain to work together to try and resolve this problem. And to work together to cooperate, there needs to be two sides. From the moment when the double talking from Great Britain stops and there is a serious attitude, when we can talk and our exchanges in private correspond to those taking place in public, then the French government is absolutely ready to resume discussions with Great Britain very quickly.
And joining us for more on this story, we have our international correspondent, Annelise Borges. Annelise, thanks so much for being with us. Tell us more about what France's Interior Minister had to say at this meeting.
Hi there. Well, Gérald Darmanin was speaking following a Security Council held here in Paris this morning, attended by France's President Emmanuel Macron, but also the Prime Minister of France, Jean Castex, who's reportedly going to be the one reaching out to Boris Johnson as early as tomorrow with a proposition for an agreement between the two sides in order to how to deal with this current crisis. Of course, a crisis that has been going on for some 2 decades, according to Gérald Darmanin, who's been speaking to the press throughout the day today. He spoke earlier this morning as well. And now, of course, during that announcement that he also mentioned France will be investing heavily on tackling migration on the English Channel. He said that France will be opening what he called regional offices with police officers focusing exclusively on targeting the activity of human traffickers, of smugglers, not only their activities, their presence, but also their financial movement. Gérald Darmanin said that France currently has a number of officers that work on that, but that France will be doubling that number in order to make it quicker to be able to prosecute these people. He also mentioned there will be some sort of judicial reform in order to have the mechanisms that are more adapted to the circumstances. And of course, as you mentioned, all this follows a meeting yesterday in Calais, where he was joined by European counterparts. Gérald Darmanin also said that that is going to be another priority, to work on European cooperation in face of this threat.
So, Annelise, all of these measures sound really good, European cooperation, but is there any chance that the UK is actually going to be brought back into this joint European effort?
Well, as you mentioned earlier, Gérald Darmanin was quite blunt and even harsh when it comes to his British counterpart and British officials who he says who he's accused of a double discourse. He said that in private the conversations and the negotiations go one way, but then in public they change. Of course, France is still very upset about the leaking of that letter. He says there is no trust that can remain in place in that way, and he says that it's very important for Britain to start walking the walk and no longer only promising but working towards actually cooperating with France. He says it's in both sides' interest to fix this problem, to tackle migration, illegal migration in that way, one that of course is responsible for tragedies like the one we saw last week when 27 people died in the English Channel. Gérald Darmanin also said that it's very important for Britain to actually cooperate with France, but that can only happen through the European Union. He said that it's time for a European agreement between Europe and Britain and the UK. He says that he reminded the press today that the UK decided to leave the European Union. That was a very unfortunate decision, but that was their decision, and that now all negotiations must go through Europe, must go through at a European level. We don't know for now whether or not what Jean Castex is going to be proposing to Boris Johnson tomorrow is going to be anything that could evolve into an agreement between the European Union and Britain. But certainly today a show of force of sorts from France, and a very resolute interior minister saying that Britain is the cause of all this, saying that even though the two sides don't agree on what is happening, we can't change geography, according to Gérald Darmanin.
Well, let's wait and see what happens next. Annelise, thanks for joining us. Our international correspondent, Annelise Borchers. OK, well, still to come, Swedish Parliament elects Magdalena Andersson as its first female Prime Minister once again. More on that after the break. Stay tuned. She was in, then she was out. Now she's back again. Sweden's first ever female Prime Minister, Magdalena Andersson, has been re-elected just 5 days after being first elected into the post. Andersson stepped down last Wednesday after failing to secure enough votes for the budget. But another vote in Parliament today saw the Social Democratic leader step back into the job, but in a minority government.
The Riksdag has now elected me Prime Minister, and I intend to form a social democratic government. And like all minority governments, we will seek to cooperate with other parties in the Parliament. I also see good prospects for this.
Let's bring in our reporter in Stockholm, Per Bergfors Nyberg. So, Per, Magdalena Andersson is back again as Prime Minister, but in a minority government. Now, she says she wants to work with other parties, but are they likely to get on board with her?
Well, Miriam, that's the big question now. Magdalena Andersson, she will be the Prime Minister for the next 9 to 10 months before we have the next general election. The opposition is highly critical today. They're saying this is just like a transfer government waiting for the next general election. The thing is, though, she's going to lead a minority government, like you said, with just 100 seats in Parliament of the Social Democrats. Then she's going to have to make new alliances, trying to find other parties that will support her political moves, her political suggestions going forward. It's not going to be easy, I tell you that. She has some sort of agreement with the Left Party, with the Green Party, her old coalition partner, even the Centre Party. But she might even actually start some sort of cooperation with the Moderate, the Conservative Party, trying to get specific issues through Parliament. But it's not going to be easy. You know, she's not going to be able to move major things through Parliament. She even has to rule using the Conservative opposition's budget, meaning that some things that she does not want to do, she's going to have to do it anyway, because Parliament said, well, you know what, we're going to make you Prime Minister, but you're going to have to rule on the other side's budget, Miriam.
Well, Pear's never really easy for women, but elections are now about 10 months away. So what's going to be the priority for her governments for this 10-month period?
Well, basically, she's outlined 3 specific areas. Number 1, welfare, making sure that people have a safety net in the Swedish society. Number 2, creating new green jobs. She wants to fight climate change and create new jobs at the same time. And number 3, it's about fighting gang violence. We've had a surge in gang violence in Sweden over recent years, with deadly shootings almost every single day. We wake up to the news of another person killed in a deadly shootout between gangs. So these are the 3 specific areas that she wants to focus on. And then, of course, the whole worry about Omicron now taking charge all over the world. Just a few minutes ago, we just got the news that we had the first confirmed case of Omicron here in Sweden as well. So even though all these European governments are trying to do everything they can to stop it spreading into their societies, well, it's already here. So that will be another mammoth task for Magdalena Andersson to try to handle in the months and days and weeks going forward.
Things really aren't so easy for her, are they, Per? Well, thank you so much for joining us, our reporter there in Stockholm. So Twitter's CEO, Jack Dorsey, has announced he's resigning with immediate effect. Posting on his own social network, Dorsey said he was really sad but really happy about leaving the company. Matthew in the Cube has more on the story.
Indeed, Mariam, it was on Twitter, where else, that Jack Dorsey, the CEO and co-founder of the social network, confirmed earlier media reports that he had resigned. In a letter emailed to staff, Dorsey said he would be stepping down as chief executive with immediate effect, to be replaced by Twitter's current chief technical officer, Parag Agrawal. And he also said he would only remain on Twitter's board until around next May, describing the decision to leave the company after nearly 16 years as a tough one. But Jack Dorsey also said that he believes companies that are led by their founder are limited. You see, he was originally Twitter's CEO until 2008. He then lost the role before being renamed as chief executive in 2015. And since then, Dorsey has come under criticism for not letting go of the reins. In addition to Twitter, Jack Dorsey is also the chief executive of Square, a financial payments company that he founded. And some big investors have questioned how effective he can be in leading both companies. Dorsey himself has said that he believes cryptocurrencies are critical for Twitter as a company and as a social network. It's also worth noting that in recent months, Jack Dorsey was one of a number of CEOs called to testify before the US Senate about how big tech companies can spread misinformation and dangerous online content. But now Jack Dorsey has told employees of Twitter that he believes they can change the course of the company for the better, saying in this letter, Mariam, that he has resigned from Twitter, saying it is critical for companies like this one to be free from their founders, and it's certainly going to be interesting to see how Twitter develops as a company in the post-Dorsey era.
It definitely will be very interesting to see where Twitter goes to next. Thanks, Matthew. It's bright, it's abstract, and it's selling for 5-figure sums. But the artwork we're talking about was not created by a human, nor is it based on the inspiration of one single artist, as Camille Poverel explains.
These artworks were not made by human hand. They are the work of an artificial intelligence system called Boto. Created by German artist Mario Klingman, the project is based on the taste of 5,000 people. In just 5 weeks, pieces have been sold for nearly 900,000 euros.
That's how Boto creates its art. It creates a sentence, feeds that into a neural network, and gets an image back. And that neural network has seen more art, more images than any single human being around. So every week, the community votes on these fragments, and at the end of each week, one gets chosen to be art. And that will be auctioned off as an NFT on a platform called Super Rare, where some collectors can buy it.
A non-fungible token is a unique identity of data stored on the blockchain. This director of an auction house has noticed the rise of interest in these digital forms.
I think the digital artwork and the blockchain world now is so interesting. In the world of art, artists are interested in creating digital artworks, and logically the collectors are interested as well. And I think it's important that the collectors buy the first pieces that are being done in this format and with this technology.
Boto engineers say their project is a mixture between collective and artificial intelligence. According to them, Boto could be soon able to write music or books.
And that's all we have on the programme. I'm Mariam Saidi. Take care.